My name is Rachel Goldstein. I'm 81 years old, and I'm going to tell you about how a Nazi SS colonel tattooed the words military gentum, military property, across my lower abdomen, raped me systematically for 8 months, and told me I'd carry his mark of ownership to my grave. He was right about one thing. I did carry it to this day. But what he didn't anticipate was that this tattoo, this permanent brand he burned into my skin to claim me as his property, would become Exhibit A in the trial that convicted him at Nuremberg. I slowly lift my shirt to reveal my elderly abdomen. There, faded but still clearly visible, are the Gothic letters etched into my skin 79 years ago. MILITARY, military property. The skin is wrinkled now, aged, but the letters remain. Dark ink permanently embedded in scar tissue. Each letter approximately 2 inches tall, stretching across my lower belly just above my pelvis. This is what SS Obersturmbannführer Heinrich Brandt did to me in 1944 when I was 16 years old. He tattooed me like livestock, marked me as belonging to the Third Reich.
To him.
He used a crude tattooing needle, no anesthesia, while I screamed and bled. Then he raped me on that same table while the ink was still fresh and burning. That was the first time. There would be 247 more times over the next 8 months. Yes, I counted. Every single one. Because I knew someday, somehow, I would testify. And I wanted to be exact. I lower my shirt and look directly into the camera. Colonel Heinrich Brandt died in prison in 1952, 7 years after the war ended, serving a life sentence for crimes against humanity. He was 52 years old when he died. A heart attack in his cell. Too quick, too painless for what he deserved. But he died knowing that the tattoo he put on my body, the mark he thought would ensure my silence and shame, was the single piece of evidence that guaranteed his conviction. The prosecutors at Nuremberg called it irrefutable physical proof of systematic sexual enslavement. The judges called it barbaric ownership through bodily mutilation. I call it the scar that destroyed him. Every expert he brought to court tried to explain it away. They said maybe I got it voluntarily. Maybe I was a prostitute who marked herself. Maybe it was a forgery applied after the war to frame an innocent officer. But the medical examiners were definitive. The ink was period correct. The scarring was consistent with wartime application. The infection patterns in the tissue proved it was done in 1944. And most importantly, the handwriting matched. They compared the Gothic script on my body to Brandt's handwritten documents, his letters, his orders. Every curve, every stroke, every detail matched his hand. He'd signed his crime directly onto my flesh. This is the story of how a Nazi colonel tried to own me by marking me as property, and how that very mark became the weapon that convicted him. This is the story of how shame became power, how a brand of slavery became evidence of a crime, how what he did to silence me gave me the loudest voice in that courtroom. Let me take you back to where it began. Poland, 1944. I was 16 years old, and the world was burning. I was born Rachel Leah Goldstein in 1938 in Warsaw, Poland. My father owned a small bookshop. My mother was a seamstress. We were a typical Jewish middle-class family. Not wealthy, but comfortable. We had enough. I had 2 younger brothers, David, who was 13, and little Samuel, who was only 9 when everything ended. When I was 1 year old, Germany invaded Poland. September 1939. My earliest memories are of fear. Air raid sirens. My mother pulling me under the table. My father's face growing more worried each day. By the time I was 3, we were forced into the Warsaw Ghetto. 500,000 Jews crammed into a tiny section of the city, walled off from the rest of Warsaw. Starvation.
Disease.
Death in the streets. That was my childhood. I grew up stepping over corpses on my way to get our ration of bread. 1943, I was 5 years old when the Warsaw Ghetto uprising happened. Jews fought back against the Nazis. It was heroic and doomed. The Germans destroyed the entire ghetto, killed most of the fighters, and deported the survivors. My family survived because my father had connections with the Judenrat, the Jewish council that administered the ghetto under Nazi orders. We were on a list of essential workers. My father worked in a factory making uniforms for German soldiers. My mother sewed in a textile workshop. They kept us alive by being useful to our oppressors. After the ghetto was destroyed, we were sent to a labor camp outside Warsaw. Thousands of Jews, working 12-hour days, starving, dying, but still alive, still together as a family. My brothers and I worked in sorting warehouses, separating clothes and belongings taken from deported Jews. We knew what it meant when we found children's shoes. We knew where those children had gone, but we didn't speak of it. Speaking meant thinking. Thinking meant breaking. We couldn't afford to break. I turned 16 in March 1944. I was no longer a child in body, though childhood had been stolen from me years earlier. I was tall for my age, thin from malnutrition, but developing into a young woman. I became aware that men looked at me differently.
Guards.
Capos. Other prisoners. I started wearing oversized clothes, trying to hide my body, trying to remain invisible. In the camps, being noticed was dangerous, especially for young women. That's when Colonel Heinrich Brandt arrived at our camp. Spring 1944. He was 44 years old, SS Obersturmbannführer, which translates to Lieutenant Colonel. He'd been serving on the Eastern Front and was transferred to oversee several labor camps in occupied Poland. Tall man, maybe 6'2". Blonde hair starting to gray at the temples. Blue eyes cold as winter ice. Handsome in that Aryan way the Nazis prized. Fit, disciplined, always in perfect uniform. He looked like a recruiting poster for the master race. He arrived with specific orders. The camps under his command were to increase productivity. More output, fewer resources wasted on keeping prisoners alive. He toured our camp, inspecting the facilities, the workers, the operations. I was in the sorting warehouse when he walked through with the camp commandant. He stopped at my station, looked at me. Not the way you look at a person. The way you look at an object you're considering purchasing. He asked the commandant my age. 16, the commandant said. He asked if I was healthy. Yes, relatively. Useful worker. He nodded, made a note in his leather journal, and moved on. I felt ice in my stomach. I'd been noticed. I tried to tell myself it meant nothing. He'd looked at many prisoners. But I knew. Women know when they've been marked as prey. 1 week later, I was removed from the warehouse. Told to report to the camp administration building. I thought I was going to be punished, maybe sent to a worse camp, maybe killed. Instead, I was brought to an office.
Clean.
Organized. So different from the filthy barracks where we slept. Colonel Brandt was there, sitting behind a desk, reading through papers. He looked up when I entered. The guard pushed me forward and left, closing the door. Just Brandt and me. Sit down, he said in German. I sat. He studied me for a long moment. Then he said, I've selected you for a special assignment. You'll work directly for me. Personal assistant. You'll live in better conditions, receive better food. In exchange, you'll do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you, without question. Do you understand? I understood. I understood perfectly. Every Jewish girl in the camps knew what special assignment meant when an officer selected you. But I nodded. What choice did I have? No was not an option that kept you alive.
Good, he said.
You start tomorrow. Report here at 8 o'clock in the morning. If you tell anyone about our arrangement, I'll have your entire family sent to Auschwitz on the next transport. Your father, mother, both brothers.
Gone.
Do we have an understanding? We had an understanding.
He owned me now. Completely.
The next morning, I reported to his office, as ordered. He was waiting with another man, a German medic from the camp infirmary. There's a table in the corner, Brandt said.
Lie down on it.
I hesitated. He didn't repeat himself. I lay down on the wooden table. It was rough, unsanded. I could feel splinters through my thin dress. The medic approached with a metal case. Opened it. Inside were bottles of ink, needles, antiseptic. A tattooing kit. Medical grade, professional. I realized with horror what was about to happen. They were going to mark me. Like the Jews in Auschwitz were tattooed with numbers on their forearms. But this would be different. Brandt stood over me.
You belong to me now, he said.
I need to ensure that's clearly understood. Lift your dress. I didn't move. I was paralyzed with fear. He grabbed the hem of my dress and pulled it up himself, exposing my lower abdomen. The medic cleaned my skin with harsh antiseptic that burned. Then he took out a pen and wrote on my skin marking guidelines. Gothic letters. Military property. I was about to be branded like cattle, like a piece of equipment belonging to the German military.
To him.
I started to cry. Brandt watched with no expression.
This will hurt, he said.
But pain is temporary. The mark is permanent. Consider it a reminder of who you belong to now. If you ever try to escape, if you ever disobey, everyone who sees this mark will know you're stolen military property. They'll return you to me, and I'll punish you severely. The medic began. The pain was indescribable. The needle piercing my skin over and over, hundreds of tiny punctures, injecting ink deep into the dermis. I screamed. Brandt told me to be quiet. I couldn't. The medic kept working methodically. Each letter took 15 minutes. There were 16 letters. 4 hours of continuous pain while they tattooed ownership onto my body. I bled. I was 16 years old, malnourished, and they were carving words into my flesh. My skin split in places. The medic would wipe away the blood and continue. My abdomen was on fire. Every nerve ending screaming. I begged them to stop. They didn't stop. Brandt stood there the entire time, watching, occasionally giving instructions to the medic about letter spacing and depth. When it was finally finished, my entire lower abdomen was raw, bleeding, swollen. The letters stood out in angry red welts, the black ink stark against my pale skin. The medic bandaged it loosely and left. I tried to sit up. Brandt pushed me back down.
We're not finished, he said.
Then he raped me right there on that table while the tattoo bled through the bandages. The pain was doubled, the tattoo grinding against the rough wood with every thrust. I was screaming, crying, begging him to stop. He didn't stop until he was finished. Then he pulled up his trousers, adjusted his uniform, and told me this was my new reality. This would happen regularly. I was his property now. The tattoo proved it. He pointed to the bandages. That will take 2 weeks to heal. Don't remove the bandages. Don't let it get infected. I need you healthy. You're valuable property now. I was dismissed. I stumbled back to the barracks, bleeding, traumatized, marked permanently. For 2 weeks, the tattoo healed. It hurt constantly. Burned.
Itched.
Got infected despite my attempts to keep it clean with our limited resources. I developed a fever. Nearly died from the infection. But I survived. And when the bandages finally came off, the words were there.
Permanent. Clear.
Military gentum. Military property. In Gothic script across my lower abdomen. Brandt's handwriting. Brandt's mark. That was June 1944. The beginning of 8 months of systematic rape and enslavement. After the tattooing, I was moved from the general barracks to a small room near Brandt's office. It wasn't a privilege. It was a cage. The room had a cot, a bucket, a small table. Nothing else. The door locked from the outside. I was a prisoner within the prison camp. He kept me there, isolated from other prisoners, available for him whenever he wanted. The pattern was established quickly. Every morning, I'd report to his office to clean, organize files, type documents. Secretarial work. He used me as an actual assistant. I was good with languages, could write in Polish and German, could type accurately. He made use of that. But the work was just window dressing for what he really kept me for. Every evening, after his official duties were finished, he'd come to my room. Sometimes he'd rape me there. Sometimes he'd take me to his private quarters in the officers' building. Sometimes in his office after everyone else had left. Location varied. The assault never did. It happened every day. Sometimes multiple times a day if he was in a particular mood.
He was methodical about it.
Clinical almost. He didn't seem to derive pleasure from my pain specifically.
It was more about ownership.
About exercising his right to use his property, however he wished. He'd undress me, force me to show him the tattoo, make me read it aloud. What does it say? He'd ask. Military gentum. I'd have to answer. What does that mean? Military property. Whose property? Yours, Herr Obersturmbannführer. Only then would he proceed. Sometimes he'd bring other officers to see his acquisition. He'd show them the tattoo, like a proud owner displaying a prized possession. "Look at this," he'd say. "Perfect Gothic script.
Permanent.
She's marked as military property." The other officers would laugh, congratulate him on his ingenuity. Some would ask if they could borrow me. He always refused. "This one is mine exclusively," he'd say. "I don't share my property." The dehumanization was constant and intentional. He never used my name. It was always girl, Jew, or property. He'd make me stand at attention while he inspected me, checking my health the way you'd check livestock. He'd comment on my weight, whether I was eating enough, whether I was staying clean. Not out of care, out of property maintenance. You take care of your possessions so they remain functional. Month 2. July 1944. I tried to escape. Desperate, stupid attempt. During a moment when my room was unlocked and no guards were near, I ran. Didn't make it 100 meters before I was caught. Brought back to Brandt. I expected to be killed. Instead, he punished me by withholding food for a week. "You're too valuable to waste," he said. "But you need to learn obedience." Then he tattooed me again. This time on my inner right thigh. A number. His personal prisoner number for me. 147. "So if you're found outside camp boundaries," he explained, "this number identifies you as belonging to SS Labor Camp District 12, under my command. You're cataloged. Registered."
Mine.
The second tattooing was almost worse than the first because I knew what was coming. The anticipation of pain is its own torture. Month 3. August 1944. My mother died. Typhus. My father managed to get word to me through another prisoner. I broke down. Asked Brandt for permission to attend her burial. He refused.
"You're isolated for a reason," he said.
"Your family doesn't exist to you anymore. You exist only for me." I wasn't allowed to mourn. Wasn't allowed to say goodbye. I couldn't even tell my father I knew. The grief had nowhere to go, so it turned inward, poisoning everything. Month 4. September 1944. Brandt started photographing me. He'd acquired a camera and decided to document his property. He'd make me strip, display the tattoos, pose in humiliating positions while he photographed from every angle. The photos were clinical, documentary. He kept them in an album in his office, labeled and dated. Evidence of ownership, he called it. I didn't understand then that he was creating the evidence that would eventually convict him. Month 5. October 1944. The war was clearly turning against Germany. Even in the camp, we could sense it. Guards were nervous. Supplies were running low. Talk of evacuation. Brandt became more brutal, more frequent in his assaults. It was as if he knew his time was running out and wanted to extract maximum use from his property before it ended. Month 6. November 1944. I got sick. Very sick. The combination of malnutrition, repeated trauma, and the constant stress broke my body. I developed a fever, couldn't keep food down, could barely stand. Brandt brought the camp doctor to examine me. The doctor said I was severely malnourished and traumatized. I needed rest, better food, medical care. Brandt provided it. Not out of compassion. Out of necessity. Damaged property, needs repair. For 2 weeks, I was given extra rations, allowed to rest, given basic medical treatment. My body recovered enough to function. Then Brandt resumed his routine. I tried to disappear mentally. Learned to float outside my body during the assaults. Existed somewhere else while he used me. It was the only way to survive with my mind intact. Month 7. December 1944. Soviet forces were advancing from the east. The camp was in chaos. Prisoners were being evacuated, documents destroyed, evidence of crimes burned. Brandt was preparing to retreat westward with the German forces. But he wasn't leaving me behind. "You're coming with me," he said. "You're too valuable to leave. Plus, you're marked. If the Soviets find you, they'll just use you themselves. Better you stay with your proper owner." He was taking me with him. I'd be his property until the very end, wherever that end came. Month 8. January 1945. The camp was evacuated. Death marches began, prisoners forced to walk west in the freezing winter. Thousands died on those marches. But I didn't march with the other prisoners. I was transported in a military truck with Brandt and other SS officers, still his personal property, still marked with his tattoo, still being raped regularly as they fled the advancing Soviets. That was the reality of my 8 months as Brandt's property. 247 rapes, 2 tattoos, countless photographs, complete ownership of my body, cataloged and documented. He thought he'd gotten away with it. Thought the chaos of the war's end would let him disappear into civilian life. He was wrong. April 1945. The war was ending. Germany was collapsing. The military convoy I was traveling with was trying to reach the American lines, hoping to surrender to the Americans rather than the Soviets. But we were caught in between. The truck broke down near a small town in eastern Germany. Brandt and the other officers fled on foot, abandoning the vehicle and me. I was alone for the first time in 8 months. Free, technically. But I was in the middle of a war zone, wearing ragged clothes, covered in tattoos that marked me as property, traumatized beyond measure. I hid in the ruins of a bombed building for 3 days, surviving on rainwater and scraps. Then American soldiers found me. They were kind. Young men, horrified by what they were finding as they advanced through Germany. They gave me food, water, a blanket, asked who I was, where I came from. I could barely speak, but I showed them the tattoo. The main one, across my abdomen. Military Gentum. Military property.
They photographed it, documented it.
One soldier, who spoke some German, asked me who did this. SS officer, I managed to say. Name? Heinrich Brandt. He wrote it down. They took me to a displaced persons camp set up for Holocaust survivors. There were thousands of us. Walking skeletons. Traumatized. Trying to figure out if any family had survived. I learned my father and brothers had died during the evacuation of the camp. Exact circumstances unknown. They were just gone. I was alone. The only survivor of my family. The tattoo became my shame. Other survivors had numbers on their forearms from Auschwitz. Mine said military property across my belly. When I bathed in the communal facilities, women stared.
Some knew what it meant. Some pitied me.
Some were disgusted, assuming I'd collaborated, been a capo or worse. The tattoo branded me even after liberation. I wore layers of clothing to hide it. Never let anyone see. Months passed. I slowly recovered physically. The mental recovery would take decades. The DP camp had resources for survivors. Medical care, therapy, assistance finding relatives. I had no relatives to find. I was 17 years old, completely alone, marked permanently as property. 1946 Nuremberg trials began. Major war criminals were being prosecuted. I heard about it, but never imagined it would relate to me. Brandt wasn't the major figure. He was just a colonel, one of thousands of SS officers who'd committed atrocities. Why would anyone care about him specifically? Then, in late 1946, I was contacted by Allied war crimes investigators. They were building cases against mid-level SS officers, and Brandt's name had come up. Multiple witnesses had reported his crimes. The American soldier who documented my tattoo had filed his report. They wanted to know if I'd be willing to testify. I was terrified. Testifying meant exposing the tattoo publicly. Meant standing in a courtroom and explaining what had been done to me. Meant reliving everything. But the investigator said something that changed my mind. He said, "We have other victims of Brandt. We have documentation. But we don't have physical evidence. Your tattoo is physical evidence. Irrefutable.
Permanent.
It proves ownership, proves systematic abuse, proves intent. Without it, he might walk free." I said yes. I would testify. I would show the tattoo. For myself, and for every other girl he'd used and discarded. The preparation for trial took months. The prosecutors were building a comprehensive case against Brandt. He'd been captured in 1946 hiding under a false identity in Bavaria, working as a clerk. He denied everything. Said he was just a logistics officer, never committed any crimes, never even visited labor camps. It was a common defense among captured Nazis. Deny, minimize, claim you were just following orders or weren't present at all. But the prosecutors had evidence. They'd found his office files, partially burned but recoverable. They had photographs, including the photographs he'd taken of me and other women. They had testimony from other survivors. And they had me, the physical proof. The legal team prepared me extensively. A female lawyer worked with me specifically on the tattoo evidence. She explained how it would work in court. I'd be called as a witness. I'd testify about what happened. Then I'd be asked to show the tattoo. In front of the judges, the prosecutors, the defense, the gallery. Everyone would see. She was gentle but honest. "This will be humiliating," she said. "But it's the strongest piece of evidence we have." They also prepared me for what the defense would argue. They claim I got the tattoo myself as a false accusation. They claim I was a prostitute who serviced officers voluntarily. They try to destroy my credibility. "You need to be ready for that," the lawyer said. "You need to be strong." I met some of the other women who'd been Brandt's victims. There were 7 of us willing to testify. Others had died or couldn't be found. We shared our stories. Each story was similar: young, Jewish, selected by Brandt, raped systematically, marked in some way. 2 had been tattooed like me, though their markings were numbers, not words. We became each other's support system. We'd all been his property. Now we'd all be his prosecutors. 1947, the trial date was set. It would be a military tribunal, part of the subsequent Nuremberg proceedings. Not the famous International Military Tribunal that tried Göring and other top Nazis. That was finished. This was one of the 12 follow-up trials prosecuting thousands of lower-level perpetrators. Brandt would be tried alongside other SS officers accused of crimes in labor camps. The night before I testified, I couldn't sleep. I kept looking at the tattoo in the mirror.
For 2 years, I'd hidden it, covered it,
tried to pretend it wasn't there. Tomorrow, I'd expose it to the world. The mark of my enslavement would become evidence. The brand that had shamed me would shame him. I tried to find strength in that irony. I also thought about what the lawyer had told me. "This tattoo proves intent," she'd said.
It proves systematic planning.
He didn't impulsively assault you. He methodically marked you as property first. The premeditation makes the crime worse legally. Your body is evidence of his calculated cruelty. That perspective helped. I wasn't just a victim showing my wounds. I was evidence. Walking, breathing, speaking evidence. The morning of my testimony, I put on the simple dress the lawyers had provided. Dark, modest, professional. The kind of dress that could be lifted to show the tattoo easily. I was 19 years old. I'd survived the Warsaw Ghetto, a labor camp, 8 months as Brandt's property, and the aftermath. I could survive this testimony. The courtroom was in the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg. Formal, imposing, filled with legal authority. American military judges presided. Prosecutors, defense attorneys, stenographers, translators. And in the defendant's box, Heinrich Brandt. I hadn't seen him in 2 years. He was thinner, grayer, wearing a cheap civilian suit instead of his SS uniform. But his eyes were the same.
Cold. Calculating.
He looked at me when I entered. No recognition. No remorse. Just cold assessment, like he was still evaluating property. I was sworn in. Promised to tell the truth. Then the prosecutor began. "State your name for the record." "Rachel Leah Goldstein." "Your age?" 19 years old. "Your nationality?" "Polish." "Jewish?"
"Yes."
"Where were you during the war?" I told my story. Warsaw Ghetto. Labor camp. Selected by Brandt in April 1944.
Taken to his office.
Tattooed. Raped. Held as personal property for 8 months. 247 times. I kept my voice steady. Focused on facts, not emotions. The prosecutor asked detailed questions.
Dates.
Locations. Specific incidents. I answered everything. Then came the critical moment. "Miss Goldstein," the prosecutor said, "you testified that the defendant tattooed you. Can you describe this tattoo?" I described it. Location: on my lower abdomen. The words "Military Gentum" in Gothic script. Approximately 8 inches wide, 2 inches tall. Black ink.
Permanent.
The prosecutor paused. Miss Goldstein, I know this is difficult, but would you be willing to show the tribunal this tattoo as evidence? I took a breath. Yes, I said. Stand up, please. I stood. The courtroom was silent. Everyone watching. The prosecutor gestured to a female bailiff who brought a privacy screen. Behind the screen, please lift your dress to expose the tattoo. The bailiff will photograph it, and the photograph will be shown to the tribunal. If you're willing, you may also display it directly to the judges. I stepped behind the screen, lifted my dress to my chest. The bailiff photographed the tattoo from multiple angles. Then I stepped out from behind the screen and walked directly toward the judge's bench. I held my dress up. The 3 judges leaned forward to look. I stood there, exposed, letting them see every letter of Brandt's handwriting carved into my flesh. The judges examined it carefully. One asked permission to have a medical expert examine it. A doctor was called. He studied the tattoo, touched the scarred skin gently, took measurements. Then he testified. This tattoo is consistent with application in 1944. The ink is period correct. The scarring indicates it was done by someone with medical tattooing knowledge, but not professionally, consistent with a military medic. The infection patterns in the tissue support her testimony that it became infected after application. This is not a recent tattoo. It's approximately 3 years old. The prosecutor then showed the photographs Brandt had taken. Exhibit 47. Photographs of the witness taken by the defendant in 1944. The courtroom saw the photographs. Me at 16, gaunt and traumatized, the fresh tattoo visible across my abdomen, Brandt's handwriting unmistakable. Then the prosecutor brought in a handwriting expert. He displayed multiple documents written by Brandt. Military orders, personal letters, reports. All in Gothic script. The expert testified. This tattoo was written by the same hand that wrote these documents. The letter formation, the specific curves of the Gothic M, the spacing, the pressure, all identical. The defendant didn't just tattoo her. He signed her with his personal handwriting. The courtroom was stunned. Even Brandt looked shaken. His own handwriting had convicted him. The defense attorney tried to recover. Objection. This proves nothing except that my client may have been present when a tattoo was applied. It doesn't prove rape, doesn't prove enslavement. The prosecutor was ready.
It proves ownership.
It proves intent. It proves systematic dehumanization. Combined with the testimony of 7 victims, the photographs he took, the documents we recovered, this tattoo proves that Colonel Brandt didn't just commit rape. He committed systematic sexual enslavement. He branded his victims like cattle. He kept documentary evidence of his crimes. This isn't a crime of passion. This is calculated, premeditated, sustained criminal behavior. The judges agreed to admit the tattoo as evidence. Exhibit 1. Photograph of the tattoo on Rachel Goldstein's body. Primary physical evidence of systematic sexual enslavement by the defendant. The trial continued for 2 more weeks. Other victims testified. Documents were presented. The defense tried to argue that Brandt was following orders, that the women had been assigned to him by superior officers, that it was wartime and standards were different. Every argument fell apart against the evidence. But the tattoo remained the centerpiece. Prosecutors kept referring back to it. This isn't just assault. This is ownership. He marked her as property. That's not a military order. That's personal sadism and criminal enslavement. The defense had no answer for it. How do you explain tattooing military property on a 16-year-old girl except as an act of claiming ownership? The day of the verdict, the courtroom was packed. I sat in the gallery with the other survivors. We held hands. Heinrich Brandt stood as the judges read their decision. Guilty on all counts. Crimes against humanity. Sexual enslavement. Torture. Murder. 3 other women had died in his custody. The judges detailed each crime, but they gave special attention to the tattoos. The act of tattooing these women, the chief judge said, represents a particularly cruel form of dehumanization. Colonel Brandt didn't just assault his victims. He marked them permanently to assert ownership. He branded them like livestock. This physical marking, combined with the systematic sexual abuse, constitutes one of the clearest examples of enslavement we've seen in these proceedings. The defendant treated human beings as property. The evidence is literally written on their bodies. Sentencing: life imprisonment. Brandt showed no emotion. He was led away in handcuffs. I watched him go and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Just emptiness. He was convicted. Justice was served. But the tattoo was still on my body. That didn't change. After the trial, reporters wanted to interview me. I refused most of them. But one female journalist asked a question that stuck with me. She asked, "Now that he's convicted, will you try to have the tattoo removed?" I hadn't considered it. I said I didn't know. That night, I looked at the tattoo again. For 2 years, I'd hated it. It was the mark of my shame, my victimhood, my dehumanization. But in that courtroom, it had become something else. It had become evidence.
Proof. Power.
The very thing Brandt used to claim ownership had been used to take his freedom. The brand he'd put on me had branded him as a criminal. I decided then I wouldn't remove it. Not because I wanted it, but because removing it felt like letting him win. He'd marked me intending to silence me. Instead, the mark had spoken louder than any words. It had convicted him. Removing it wouldn't erase what happened. It would just erase the evidence. And I wanted the evidence to remain. Heinrich Brandt died in prison in 1952, 7 years after the war ended. Heart attack in his cell at Spandau prison in Berlin. He was 52 years old. I was 27 when I learned of his death. I felt nothing. He was already gone from my life. The verdict had ended him. His death was just a footnote. I immigrated to the United States in 1948, built a new life in New York. Met a man, Jacob, another Holocaust survivor. I told him everything before we married. Showed him the tattoo. He cried when he saw it. Not out of disgust. Out of rage at what had been done to me. We married anyway. Had 3 children. I never hid the tattoo from them. When they were old enough to understand, I explained what it was, why I had it, what it meant. Over the decades, the tattoo faded slightly, but never disappeared. The ink is permanent. The scar tissue is permanent. I'm 81 years old now, and those Gothic letters are still visible across my elderly abdomen. Military Gentum. Military property. Brandt's handwriting. Brandt's crime. But also my evidence. My testimony. My weapon. I've spoken at schools, universities, Holocaust remembrance events. Every time I speak, I show the tattoo. Not to shock, but to educate. To provide physical, undeniable proof of what the Nazis did. People can deny stories. They can doubt testimonies. But they cannot deny a permanent mark carved into flesh 79 years ago. The tattoo makes it real in a way words alone cannot. Medical researchers have studied my tattoo. It's been photographed, analyzed, included in forensic studies about Nazi body marking practices. Museum exhibits about the Holocaust have used images of it as educational material. It's become historical evidence, not just legal evidence. Future generations will see this mark and understand concretely what ownership looked like, what dehumanization looked like, what systematic sexual enslavement looked like. To every survivor of sexual violence, especially those whose abusers marked them, scarred them, or left permanent evidence on their bodies, those marks are not your shame. They are proof of crimes committed against you. What your abuser intended as a mark of control can become evidence of their guilt. Your body can testify even when your voice is doubted. Brandt tattooed me intending to silence me forever. He thought the shame of being marked would keep me quiet. He thought no one would believe a tattooed Jewish girl. He was wrong about everything. The tattoo gave me the loudest voice in that courtroom. It spoke in a language judges and juries understand. Physical.
Permanent.
Irrefutable. Evidence. I lift my shirt one final time, showing the camera the faded but still visible letters. This is Exhibit A. This is the mark that convicted a Nazi war criminal. This is proof that what perpetrators do to control us can become the weapon that destroys them. Heinrich Brandt signed his own conviction when he signed my body with his handwriting. I survived. The tattoo survived. The evidence survived. And justice, though delayed and imperfect, was served. Remember this. Shame cannot exist where truth is spoken. Marks cannot silence when they become testimony. And property can never truly own a human soul. I was never his property. I was his victim. Then I became his prosecutor. Then I became his conviction. And now I am a witness to history, carrying permanent proof of crimes that must never be forgotten or repeated. This is my testimony. This is my mark. This is my victory.